Hello and welcome. We're really excited to have you all here for our second Farmers Market Legal Toolkit webinar, using checklists for risk management at farmers markets. So my name is Lilani Nelson, and I am the Assistant Director at the Center for Ag and Food Systems here at Vermont Law School, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. So I just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So you will all be on mute for the duration of the webinar. And apologies that I sent a message to everybody asking you to mute yourselves. That meant to go to the panelists, but just know that you will automatically be on mute, so you don't need to worry about that. We are recording the webinar, and we're going to send the recording out to all of you that registered, and it will also be located on our website and archived, so you can watch it or share it with others later on. You can ask questions using the question window during this webinar at any point, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible at the end. And if we don't, we will try to follow up with you directly about it. And if you have technical questions, I think the chat feature might work better for that than a question. So if you have any technical things, use the chat box. And lastly, you can access the 3 checklists that we are talking about today in the webinar in the handout section. So on the right panel of your screen, there's a handout section, and it has 3 PDFs, which are the checklists that we're going to go over today. So you already have those right on hand. All right, so before we get into those checklists, I'm going to give you a little background on the project and the partners, and then a brief overview of the website. So the Farmers Market Legal Toolkit was developed over the course of 4 years, with the website being launched in January 2018. The specific topics that we cover in the toolkit were selected in response to recurring questions from farmers market managers about 3 things. 1, how business structures would affect their organizations. 2, what types of legal risks exist and how to manage them. And 3, how to make farmers market products available and accessible for all community members by understanding the rules and implementing SNAP EBT. And this is a national resource, and we're going to continue to update it as we can. So in terms of the partners, you can see on this first slide, it's a collaboration of 3 different groups. So I'm here at the Center for Ag and Food Systems at Vermont Law School with Emily Spiegel, who's an assistant professor here, and Nico Lustig, who is a student who's going to be presenting today. But I have to say there are many other students and former staff that have worked on this project from our center. And in terms of what we do, CAFS is dedicated to creating food systems that are sustainable, just, and humane. We do this by training law and policy leaders, designing innovative legal and policy tools, and generating creative ideas to advance progress and inspire change. So the other partners that we have are Farmers Market Coalition and NOFA Vermont. And at the Farmers Market Coalition, we've worked with Jen Cheek and Dar Wolnick, who's speaking today on the webinar. And just a little bit about that organization. The Farmers Market Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to strengthening farmers markets across the U.S. so that they can serve as community assets while providing real income opportunities for farmers. FMC serves as an information center for farmers markets, a voice for North American farmers markets advocacy, to promote farmers markets to the public, to develop and provide educational programming and networking opportunities for farmers markets and farmers market vendors. And last but not least, NOFA Vermont is the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont. And since 1971, NOFA Vermont has served as the voice for organic production for commercial producers, homesteaders, and gardeners. NOFA Vermont works to support local organic farmers and gardeners, making healthy food more accessible to all Vermonters, and build strong agricultural-based communities. NOFA Vermont is also the parent organization for the Vermont Farmers Market Association. And we've had the pleasure of working with Erin Buckwalter from NOFA Vermont on this project, and she's also going to be speaking today. And then lastly, this toolkit was made possible with funding from USDA, National Institute for Food and Ag. All right, so I'm going to take you to the website to give you a quick overview of the resource before we go to the checklist. So I'm going to click right there, and you can follow along on your own computer if you want, or you can just watch on my screen as I navigate through the website. So when you first get to the landing page here, you'll notice there are 3 main sections: pick a business structure, implement SNAP EBT, and manage your risks. So today we're going to be talking primarily about the managing risk section in the market rules and procedures. So I'll take you there really quick. So the checklist that I said before uploaded in the handout section of the webinar are also available through the website right now in a few places in this section. And for example, here you can find the annual legal checkup for markets linked directly from the market rules and procedures section. But we have good news. In the next few weeks or month, we are going to be adding a new tab at the top that's a resources tab that will make it even easier for you to find these checklists. So stay tuned for it being much easier to find them. And for now, at least you have them available as PDFs from the webinar. All right, the other things I just want to point out are that we have a section of the website that tells you a little more about the toolkit, also shows the webinars that we've recorded, and a final section that allows you to contact us with any questions or feedback. And we encourage you to provide any feedback at any point about this resource. If you have ideas that could make it better or questions, just use this contact us form. And I also failed to mention, I jumped over at the case study section where you can learn about some real stories from on the ground from farmers markets and their legal issues. And I'll let you explore those whenever you want. We're not going to have time to get into them today. All right, so back to our agenda. We are today going to be talking about 3 checklists. The first one is the Market Day Safety Checklist, and Dar Walnick at the Farmers Market Coalition is going to take us through that one. So at this point, I'm going to open up the checklist, and I'm going to have Dar talk about it. You there, Dar?
Great. I am.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? Great. That was a great overview. Thanks. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the Market Day checklist, and I'm going to start though talking very quickly about the idea of the checklist and how, I mean, obviously those of you on the call, you're on the call because you know that you'd like to institute these types of things, but you might need a little language to talk to your board or to your vendors about why you might need these kinds of checklists. And I think probably the best way to talk about this sort of risk management strategy is to think about how one would define a great market. And great markets, I think, have only a few things in common. They're not all in the biggest cities or the oldest or the largest number of vendors, but all great markets have a transparent, inclusive decision-making process that they can explain how and why and who makes decisions. And I think the second thing they do is they think about how they can measure the impact on all of the different communities that they serve, vendors, shoppers, neighbors, all kinds of subgroups in there. And so you can see how those kinds of markets do this work so most significantly on market day, right? It's easy to go to market day and see if that's actually the case by seeing how they operate and how they manage their decisions and how they make sure that they're serving everybody. And so in essence, the checklists are going to offer that ability for every market to do the same, to build their capacity through them. And that was the idea for the impetus for these checklists. And we created something we thought would be a template, but we certainly expect you to take those checklists that we created, those general checklists, and really make them unique and most helpful for you at the market. And there are some ways that we want to talk about that you would do that, including taking that checklist and organizing it based on how the market flows. So the checklist for the market day, we hope you can do that every day. If not, you're not going to do it every market day. We hope that you would at least be able to do a market day checklist at least once a month. Obviously, it would be great for those checklists once completed to be all together, to remain in a binder, to remain at the welcome booth so that they can be referred to if needed in future when people go to do the checklists. But the main thing is, of course, to say to somebody, okay, we're going to have you do the checklist today. We're going to ask you to put your name on the top of it, and we're going to have the date on it so that we know who completed that checklist. We obviously want to make sure that this is a capacity building exercise. So it's not just the market managers that can do it. The great thing about a checklist like this is you can train just about anybody to do it if it's really set up well. That's why the flow of it is important. that you make sure that it really, if your market, you walk through the parking lot first, then parking should be first. If you walk through the market and the vendor welcome booth is at the very end, then that's where that should be on the checklist, obviously. We also think it's important that you share this checklist with your vendors, obviously ahead of time. That's another thing that great markets do. They don't throw surprises at their vendors at the last minute. They tell them what's happening ahead of time. So putting the checklist together, sharing it with the vendors, explaining that the checklist is meant to help the market build their capacity, manage risks. It's not meant to be an aha and catch people doing bad things. It's really a way to make sure that everybody is in the same, that we know that we're handling all these things well. So that's really, I think, really key to that. And then that other people are doing the checklist, I think, is really key. And it's not just the market manager doing these. I think the other way to do this is to think about these ideas on here. Like if you go to the checklist, you can see that there are things that say things like, you know, according to your market rules. So obviously, if you're going to use something that says according to market rules, having a list of the market rules in that binder is obviously very important, so that everybody can, if they want to know exactly what the rule is for that, you might even assign actual, you know, an actual letter to it, that particular checklist item, and then, you know, put that in the, and record that into the rules. That's easy to find for that person when they're walking through the checklist. And that also is the same thing for things that you can see on the checklist right now for things like tarps, that talks about how to install and secure tarps and tents according to reduced tripping hazards. Well, for somebody to go through that checklist and actually know what you mean by that, it might be helpful for you to actually have photographs of what the best practice for that would be, and laminate those photos and stick them in the binder too, so that somebody that was coming through the market and doing this would know what the best practices they're looking for will actually look like. I think that's a really good best practice for almost any type of market logistics, is photographs of how it should be set up, and then leaving those in the hands of at the welcome booth. And the person doing the checklist, I think, should be identifiable. They should have a market ID of some kind. The vendors should know who's coming, either by email or by letting folks know that morning or that afternoon that this is who's going to be doing the checklist. I think it's very important for that person doing the checklist to be unobtrusive, but not covert, not hidden. So they need to be available and be able to be seen, but they shouldn't be standing in front of vendor booths frowning as they fill out a checklist, or shaking their head, or doing anything that would really raise stress, tension, or, you know, interrupt the commerce that is meant to be the most important thing at the market. So I think that's extremely important, that you really help, and the market manager probably should walk through with that person doing the checklist the first time and sort of show them exactly how to do it and what should be done. I think the last best practice I'm going to suggest today on the market day checklist is that if it's possible, and there is a great example of somebody doing something very well from the checklist, and there can be a photograph taken of that, or there's something that's quite wrong, and the person is going to mark that on the checklist. If a photograph can be taken somewhat unobtrusively but not causing too much tension, that should be done. And then the last, of course, and most important thing is, because this is a risk checklist, if there are things that are marked as unsatisfactory and need to be handled right away, that sort of process has to be defined by the market ahead of time. Are there things that the person doing the checklist has said, if that you see something like that going on, whether it's food safety or a very dangerous risk, please come directly back to us and let us know. Don't wait till the end. Don't just leave it in the checklist. Actually let us know. Obviously, things like a tripping hazard would be a good example of that. So that's, I think, in using this correctly and organizing them and keeping all this in one place is a way for this process to become, to build operational support for the market, but also to create a fair process for vendors and for shoppers as well. So that's, I think, the key to this when you think about instituting, especially the market day checklist, that you're thinking about it is not another, it's not going to, don't make it a tense, tense situation, but make it as a thing that's actually going to help vendors and the market manage their operation better. Because what we know about great markets is that they create relatively drama-free market days that allow them to have richly experiential operations, which is what we're all after. So that's the beautiful thing about doing the checklist right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dar. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Erin Buckwalter with NOFA Vermont, and now we're talking about the annual legal checkup. And for the same reason that Dar said, markets would want to do market day safety checklists, they apply to the annual legal checkup. I think one really important thing is doing these checkups and having documentation of that provide you with a record of what you have done should an issue ever arise, which as I've worked on this legal toolkit, having those records has become something that's very important to me. And when I work with markets, kind of explaining that that's a way that you can kind of share what you've done. And another thing that I think that it really serves for is if your market has transition, either expected or unexpected, it's a way to carry along the institutional knowledge of what you are doing and what you need to do, in this case on an annual or seasonal basis, so that you're not letting things fall through the cracks. So especially if you have someone new on at the beginning of the season, this is an easy thing to hand them so that they know where to get started. And something to consider, we wrote this as an annual legal checkup, but you might consider if you have two different locations, say a summer and a winter location, you might actually do this on a seasonal basis. So that's something that you'll have to decide for your market. Some of the things to really consider when you're developing your annual legal checkup for your market are to make sure that any of your annual paperwork or your fees that need to be filed are filed for your business structure. And this document has a little brief overview of what those annual obligations are, and then you can learn more on the website. Obviously, you know, we all have insurance for our markets, and making sure that everything's up to date around our insurance is very important. Some of the things to consider are, does your market have any new property, or do you need to make any updates to your inventory? If you have any contacts that have changed, making sure that those get updated with your insurance company. If you require your vendors to list your market as an additionally insured, making sure you have documentation that your vendors have done that. Or if you've changed locations, making sure that your insurance company knows. Some of our markets own the property that they're on, and others work with a host site, so they're leasing the property or renting it. Making sure that your lease or rental agreement, if you have one, is up to date, or at least having a conversation about what the expectations are on an annual basis is really important. Many folks will do a walkthrough on an annual basis with a landowner to review the condition, and you know, if there's any issues like a pothole or you know, something that the landowner might need to fix, that's something that you want to be pointing out, and if possible, have some sort of documentation about who's going to fix it, what that timeline looks like, so that you have something in writing to look back over. There's also, as we know, often updates to our market rules or our vendor applications, participation agreements, etc. So making sure that that's on your checklist to both review those and share those so that everyone is on the same page. And you might be also be sharing them with your customers. So say you make a change to whether you want to allow pets at the market, you're going to need to be able to communicate that really clearly. Another thing to review and update annually is the market day checklist that Darlene just talked about. So something might have changed with your setup, or you might have gotten a new type of vendor that requires some sort of different setup. So being able to look at your market day checklist and making sure that everything on it's still relevant and up to date is going to be really important. Thinking about things like, are your staff trained in emergency procedures? Are there any trainings they need to get on an annual basis? Have you coordinated with any of your local authorities, making sure that they know who to contact at your market, especially if the main contacts have changed in the last year? If any vendors are, you know, having an issue and need any disciplinary procedures, having clear communications with them. And as I mentioned before, just having a way to transfer this institutional knowledge, putting any of these updated documents and your completed checklist in a legacy binder or some sort of documentation that can get passed along to other people at your market. And some markets accept SNAP benefits. So of course, if you have any changes, you need to let FNS know, changes with who your responsible official are, or changes with your market location or your bank account. You want to let your service provider know, so you're definitely getting that information. And then you also want to review your practices. How are you tracking and accounting for market currency? Have you reconciled any of your outstanding currency liabilities? And are you providing updates to your vendors about how the system works? And so if there have been any changes, you need to inform your older vendors that have been there, but also you need to make sure that new vendors coming on know about that and have been trained so they know what to expect. And I think that's the overview. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Erin. All right, so we have one more checklist to go over. And Nico Lustig, a student here at Vermont Law School, is going to talk through the annual market vendor communications checklist. So here you go, Nico.
Thanks, Alani. So after considering your market's legal and business requirements for the year, it is good practice to communicate any changes or updates with the vendors that you're working with on at least an annual basis. So this checklist walks you through the ingredients that you would want to add to an email or a letter or a handout at a vendor's meeting, or for some other form of communication for updating your vendor application form that would give you an ounce of prevention and would save you a lot of potential risk in the long run. So we recommend going through this list during your off season or the slow season or in between the summer and winter farmers market seasons, after you've updated your own business requirements and entities, to kind of look through what the rules are and make those messages clear and apparent to all involved in making a great market. The annual vendor communication checklist gives you the guidelines for sharing these updated rules with the people that you're working with. For example, if you are adopting the annual or the daily market checklist that we've provided, we would recommend communicating that early and often with the vendors that you'll be working with during the market season. In this checklist, we've collected 4 main categories of recommendations to remind yourself of the important topics to include when reaching out to your vendors. The first is the rules and expectations. So this would be a listing of the key dates and times for the market for the season, and any kind of variations that might come about with market closing days or holidays that could change the hours. It's important that everyone you're working with knows when to show up and knows well in advance. This communication list in terms of dates and seasons can also be used with your market clients and customers, and any press releases that you might do to announce what day the market starts or when your hours are. In addition, the communication checklist has the request for vendors paperwork. So not only should you be updating your business entity and making sure that the insurance for the market itself is taken care of, but you should also be looking for proof of insurance and proof of any kind of certificates with the vendors that you're working with. That just gives you a second opportunity to have assurances that whatever may arise will be attended to and taken care of smoothly. Next is the communications for the season. As mentioned in the legal toolkit, in the legal checklist, this works on updating the phone list or the email list or any other kind of communication tools that you use to be in contact with your vendors. This can be especially useful for unplanned weather extreme events that happen that might make it necessary for you to cancel the market or change the location of a market depending on what arises. So just being connected to your vendors once a year through this annual communication can give you the opportunity to stay in close contact with them year round, and especially during the market season. Third is the vendor setup list. This would be providing your vendors with the rules and expectations for setting up and packing up at the market, giving them the notice and kind of warning if any changes are happening from year to year. And again, as Erin emphasized, giving people the ability to know what to do with their market and have the expectations set in place. And then finally, for the markets that have SNAP benefits, it's really important for you to be able to maintain SNAP if the people that you're working with the vendors, are up to date on the rules and requirements for what can and cannot be sold through the SNAP program, and then how to use those, whether it's through a token system or through the machines and other mechanisms. So while it's still possible to run into risks even with using these checklists, there is a reduced likelihood by managing those risks in advance. And so we really hope that you will utilize these checklists as a way to make your market great. Again, we recommend sending out an email or a letter on the annual basis with this information, which not only informs your vendors about issues that might arise, but it also gives you a record and assurance of due diligence that you're paying attention to the risks that could arise on the market. Again, prevention now saves you money in the long run. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nico. All right, so we're coming up on the end of this short webinar, and right now I don't see any questions that have come in. So if you're on with us here and you have a question, feel free to submit it. And in the next couple of minutes, I'll just go over a few things for everybody to be aware of. One is that we do have a really short survey right after the webinar that'll automatically pop up. And we really appreciate your feedback on the value of this webinar to you and your markets, and any other suggestions you have for future webinars or other resources. So I hope you can take a minute or two to just fill that out. And we really encourage you to not only use these checklists, but to go to the website. The Farmers Market Legal Toolkit website is just a really comprehensive resource. I didn't go through it all with you today because we wanted to focus on these checklists as tools, but you really should check it out. It's got a lot in there, and I think everybody who is involved with farmers markets will find something really useful. And also, if you have others that you work with at your market or at other markets that weren't able to join today on the webinar, you can tell them that it will be listed on our website and they can watch it later, and that they can find these checklists on the website in the risk management section in the market rules and procedures, or you can share the checklist with them since you have the PDFs from the handouts on this webinar. Those are something to be shared widely, so feel free to share them with everybody that you know. And that's really all I have. I'm going to open it up in case Dar or Erin have anything else to add, but thank you everybody for joining, and we hope you found this useful.